Together we are invincible. Save the world from all wars. Save the world from breaking apart. Save us from losing our hearts. Save us from losing our souls. Save us from losing our souls. Save the world. Save the world from all wars. Save the world from breaking apart. Save us from losing our hearts. Save us from losing our souls. Together we can save the world. Together we are invincible. Save the world from all wars. Save the world from breaking apart. Save us from losing our hearts. Save us from losing our souls. Save us from losing our souls. Save the world. Save the world from all wars. Save the world from breaking apart. Save us from losing our hearts. Save us from
Good morning, good morning, good morning. 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 Clap your hands, clap, clap, clap. Stomp your feet, stomp, stomp, stomp. Spin around, spin, spin, spin. Alright. Good morning, good morning, good morning. 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 Wash your hands, wash, wash, wash. Shake your hands, shake, shake, shake. Brush your teeth, brush, brush, brush. Alright. Good morning.
morning. It's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right. It's me, Uncle Lou, live for you on LouTube today. And thanks for tuning in to episode 4 of the brand new morning show with Uncle Lou. Man, I love these morning shows, and I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from you guys, too. I really appreciate it. I'm a morning person. I know a lot of people aren't, but I seem to have the most amount of energy and all that kind of stuff early and first thing in the morning. So I'll be honest with you. Sometimes when I get ready to start those live shows at night, I have to try to pump myself up or whatever. But for these morning shows, I'm always ready to go. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. A bunch of you here already, well over 100. I appreciate you guys tuning in live. For everyone else that's watching later in the day, that's great too. That was sort of the purpose of this type of show that I wanted to do. People ask me for a podcast all the time. Don't really have any interest in a podcast, but this show can be treated sort of like a podcast. There's not really much of a reason to watch this, but you could always listen to it later, sort of podcast style. So that was the general idea. Slim Shady Canes, good morning, sir, and thank you for the super chat. Can anyone tell me how to fix my DVR? For some reason, every time I set it to record a Gators game, it keeps recording episodes of The Biggest Loser. I can tell you with a pretty good amount of certainty, Slim Shady Canes, that your DVR this Saturday, if it's set to the Gators, will definitely be recording that, sir, because obviously Georgia will win this game. But we got all week to talk about that. What's up to everybody in the comment section? Mike Taylor, Greg Palm, Crazy Chicken Dude, Ryan Sherlin, David Big Dog Ramsey, David Smothers. Appreciate all you guys tuning in this morning. We have a lot to talk about on Monday shows, of course, coming out of Week 9 of the college football season. So we'll get into some of the scores. Biggest upset, obviously, was Oklahoma, but we'll talk about some of the other games, too. Amarion, good morning. Jay Rizzle, Feltro, the Big 12, Alex Crompton, Hunter Kelly, Nittanyberg 20, Jarvis S. Big shout-out to all the Tennessee fans who have found their way back to the channel over the last couple of days, too. We missed you guys. We're glad to have you back. I know a lot of you stuck around. And I talked a lot about that on yesterday's Your Season Is Over video, which is normally something I don't do. The Sunday video is usually not for compliments, but I started out the Sunday video yesterday complimenting Tennessee, their football team and their fans. But after reading through the comments Saturday night and all day yesterday, I do need to welcome back a large number of Tennessee fans whose internet has not been working in quite some time, but appears to be working just fine now. And I also made a point about how some Tennessee fans need to calm down a little bit about that win. I get it's a big win, but you got some Tennessee fans already talking about 2020 now, and it's just, let's just calm some of that down a little bit. It was a good win. Let's see if Tennessee can win 3 of their next 4, make a bowl game. I said leading up to this game, Tennessee, and I said all offseason, Tennessee should have had 3 goals for 2019. Now, their fans, the insane ones, with the whole 10 wins and winning the East, it's just delusion level potato there. But you should have had 3 goals. Goal number 1 should have been to beat Will Muschamp for the first time ever. You accomplished that goal this weekend. That's the first goal. Second goal should be to beat Vanderbilt. They've owned you over the last 5 or 6 years, or they won 4 of 7 or something, 2 or 3 in a row. You got to beat Vandy. Goal number 3 should be make a bowl. If Tennessee can accomplish all 3 of those things, even if that only gets them to 6 wins, but they accomplish all 3 of those goals, you have to look at that as a successful season for Tennessee, in my opinion. So goal 1, check mark. Goal 2, you got to win 3 of the next 4, and one of those 3 has to be Vanderbilt. You do all of those things, then you will have beaten Muschamp, you will have beaten Vanderbilt, and you will have become bowl eligible at 6-6. It's possible Tennessee could win all 4. I understand that. But realistically speaking, Tennessee played the best game this past weekend we've seen them play in a long time. I'm not sure they can play at that level every single week for the rest of the season, and obviously that's what it would take for them to run the table, winning 4 out of the next 4. Can they do it? Yes, they can. But I still think the goal should be to win 3 of those 4, with one of those 4 coming against Vandy. That would check off all 3 of the goals that realistic people should have had for Tennessee this year, and I think that's within their reach. You got UAB, Kentucky, Missouri, and Vandy. Like I said, you can beat all of those teams. Will you? If I had to bet money on it right now, I would not bet money that Tennessee would win all 4 of those, just because they're still a young team. They're not used to winning. Hardly any team is able to play at their peak week in and week out, and I feel like Tennessee is the type of team that has to play at their peak to win games. So, again, we'll see, and that's not a knock on Tennessee because, again, nobody plays at their peak. You think Georgia played at their peak against South Carolina or Kentucky? No, of course not. You think Florida played at their peak against Miami or Kentucky? No. Did Oklahoma play at their peak against Kansas State? No. Did Wisconsin play at their peak against Wisconsin? No. So the point is, it's hard to play at your absolute best week in and week out. But again, I'm happy for the Tennessee fans. I really, really am. I know as a diehard college football fan, it is absolutely the most frustrating thing in the world to watch your team go out there and get beat. I mean, nobody knows that more than I do. I know Georgia has been really, really good, 3 years in a row now, but 2016 wasn't that long ago, okay? And what were we, 7-5 that year? Won a bowl game to win 8 games. That was a terrible year. So back then there wasn't nearly as many people watching Uncle Lou as is watching now. So a lot of people think that I've never, at least from the way they talk, I get the idea they feel like I've never suffered through a bad season or what. I mean, I've been a Georgia fan forever. I've been doing it on YouTube since 2014. And as everyone is quick to tell me constantly, Georgia's been no good since 1980. So, of course, I've suffered through bad seasons. So I feel the pain of the Tennessee fan. Now, maybe Georgia's never had a season, at least in my lifetime, quite like the 4-8 seasons or when they went winless in the SEC. But the point is, I understand what it's like to be a diehard college football fan and watch your team go out and lose games that you 100% should be winning. So I'm happy for Tennessee that they got to win. But to the fans that are going completely overboard and already talking about how dominant they're going to be in 2020, stop it, please. You do yourself a favor and everyone else. There's a picture going around Twitter where the path that would have to happen for Tennessee to win the East this year, and Tennessee fans are floating this picture all over Twitter. Basically, it's a rundown of every single game that's left to be played in the SEC and who has to win and lose each game. Tennessee, and if that were to happen, the way this picture runs it out, Tennessee would end up tied with Missouri at 5-3 in the SEC, with Tennessee beating Missouri, which of course would make Tennessee the SEC East champions this year. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. People are just getting carried away. You dominated them, a South Carolina team. Let's celebrate that, and let's sort of leave it at that. Okay. Big Dog, thank you for the super chat, sir. You can throw in the rain. Good morning in that. Yes, you can throw in the rain. It's been proven time and time again. No doubt about it. Jay Rizzle Drizzle, thank you for the super chat, sir. I appreciate that. I have to leave in 10 minutes. Please tell me your thoughts on LSU future. 508 total yards versus Auburn, 300 yards, score 23-20. Scoreboard doesn't always reflect complete dominance. That is true. The scoreboard does not reflect complete dominance. If you don't believe me, check the stats for Georgia versus South Carolina. We had 500 yards against South Carolina and scored 1 offensive touchdown, or 2, whatever it was, and lost. So I agree with you there. But just like everyone likes to point out to me about the final score of the South Carolina-Georgia game, the final score is all that matters. So a lot of yards without any points doesn't mean a whole lot. That's not a knock on LSU. I mean, you know that. That's just reality. LSU's offense has been completely dominant all year long. And they looked dominant against Auburn too, but they did have a hard time scoring points. So, that's just sort of is what it is. But beating Auburn by 3 is nothing to be embarrassed or ashamed about. Auburn does have a good defense, particularly their defensive front. So a 3-point win over Auburn is nothing to be embarrassed or ashamed about. And honestly, you shouldn't even have to make any excuses about it as far as, well, we had this many yards. People that watched the game, I think, understand that. But again, points are what matters in the end. Georgia dominated South Carolina. It doesn't matter. We still have an L. We still have a 1 in the loss column. So that's just what it is. Special guest coming up this morning at about 8:30. For those of you who have tuned in before, I drink way too much coffee in the morning. I found this out in the first episode, so I have to schedule a pee break here on the morning show. So, I try to do that around 8:30. During the Uncle Lou pee break, I play a moment in LouTube history for you, and I've got one picked out today. It's Florida week, so as I go back and search what I do is today is October 28th. So I just go back and look at every video I've ever uploaded on October 28th, and I pick one to play for you while Uncle Lou goes in and takes his pee break. So I got an old Florida video. It's an interesting video, too, and I'll talk a little bit more about it right before I play it. But it's an interesting video and sort of shows the mindset of Uncle Lou and how it really hasn't changed that much over the last couple of years. I just leave it at that for now. And then when we come out of that break, I'll have a guest on for you guys for the remainder of the show, and we'll talk with him. So anyway, shout out to all the teams that won this weekend. There was a lot of them. Of course, we had some upsets. We had some teams in the top 10 lose. You had Oklahoma go down, of course. That was the big shocker this weekend. Auburn, of course, lost a close one to LSU. And Notre Dame got completely road graded by Michigan. Michigan's another fan base that should be pretty happy today, regardless of what I think or you think about Notre Dame and whether or not they were overrated. And, a lot of people don't like Notre Dame. Considering how Michigan has fared in anything remotely resembling a big game over the last couple of years, I think Michigan fans honestly ought to be just as happy about beating a good Notre Dame team. You want to argue over whether they're good, great, whatever, that's fine. They're a good team at least. I think Michigan fans should be just as happy, just as excited about a big win over a good Notre Dame team as Tennessee fans are about a dominant win over an SEC team, because it's been a while since we've seen that for Tennessee. It's been a while since we've seen that for Michigan. I've talked about this a lot, but you go back and you look at all of Michigan's big games for the last 3 or 4 big games they've had. You go back to Ohio State game last year, they got blown out. The bowl game against Florida, they got blown out. The game earlier this year against who was it? It blew them. Was it Wisconsin? Drawing a blank. I think it was Wisconsin. Blew them out. Whoever it was. Then they go on the road to Penn State, lose a close one to Penn State, but then they rebound the following week and just absolutely destroy Notre Dame. So their fans have something to be happy about too. And I don't know, do you think that win at Notre Dame saved Jim Harbaugh's job? Let's say Michigan wins out with the exception of losing to Ohio State again, which would mean Harbaugh still never beat Ohio State or won the division. But they finished, what would that put them at, 9-3? Does that save Jim Harbaugh's job? What do y'all think about that? And we're getting up into the last month of the season, so it's sort of time to start wondering, thinking, guessing, whatever, what coaches are going to be on their way out at the end of this year. Is there any chance Florida State will get rid of Willie Taggart? I'm starting to think no. My feelings are clear. I think they should have got rid of him a long time ago. I don't think they ever should have hired him. To be honest, I don't think he's a good coach. I don't think he's ever going to get Florida State to where the fans and the program think they should be, but I'm not sure they fire him after the second year. Manny Diaz is not getting fired. We can stop that. Has a first-year coach ever been fired? It's a serious question. I'm sure it has happened at some point in college football history, but I don't remember a coach getting fired from a big-time program after 1 year. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't remember it. I think Moorhead at Mississippi State could be on the way out. I still think Clay Helton could possibly be on the way out. The thing about Clay Helton is, what if he ends up winning 8 or 9 games? Goes 8-4, 9-3. That would be a big improvement over last year where they missed a bowl game at 5-7. But you got Urban Meyer sitting there. If you're Southern Cal, do you reach out to Urban Meyer regardless of what Clay Helton's record is? Does anybody? Listen, I can't stand Urban Meyer, but he is a great head coach. Now, he's a trash human being, right? He's a trash human being, but he's a great head coach. If you're Southern Cal, how do you not at least reach out to him sometime this month, right, in November, and at least gauge his interest in the job? I think you have to. I mean, I think you absolutely have to. We'll see if they do it or not. I honestly don't know. I think they should, though. I 100% think they should. All right, let's run through what happened this weekend, right? I'm not going to talk about the third. I'm sorry. I'm not going to talk about the Thursday or Friday games because we talked about those Saturday morning. All right, so we're going to start with the Saturday games here, and I don't know. I'll just give some thoughts on whatever games I think might be interesting. Of course, Alabama rolled with a backup quarterback. They were up 41-0 at halftime. So I mean, this is like a lot of Alabama games we watch against inferior opponents. It seems like they're up 21-0 early in the first quarter. It seems like they're up by 30-something or 40-something points at halftime, and then they take the starters out and rest them in the second half, and you end up with a score like we have here, 48-7. Mac Jones, I thought, played well. 235 yards, 3 touchdowns. But let me ask you this. Did you see much of a difference in that Alabama game offensively with Mac Jones at quarterback versus when Tua plays? Did you see much of a difference? I didn't. I didn't see much of a difference. Now, we've known for a while that Alabama has elite wide receivers, probably 3 NFL wide receivers on that team. If you're an NFL team, do you look at this and go, is Tua really that good? I mean, if Mac Jones can come in and go 18 for 22 for 235, and I get it, it's Arkansas, but these are the same numbers Tua puts up against teams like Arkansas. So I'm just wondering with the injuries that Tua seems to suffer every single year, and the fact that it seems like Alabama can put any quarterback in there with this set of wide receivers and put up the same numbers. If you're an NFL team, are you looking at Tua and going, maybe we'll go with, Justin Herbert or whatever quarterback, or whatever. I'm not sure. Somebody is still going to draft Tua really, really high. I think Tua is a great quarterback. I do. I think he's got some things he needs to work on. I think he is a beneficiary to a certain degree of those wide receivers, but I still think he's a good quarterback, and someone's going to take him. I'm just wondering if there's any teams that are going to look at him and go, damn, if Mac Jones can do the same thing. Anyway, just wondering. LSU and Auburn, we've talked about that. Ohio State, Wisconsin, we've talked about that. Chase Young's the best player in college football, people, period. How many of you watched that Ohio State-Wisconsin game? Who was the best player on the field? It was Chase Young, and it wasn't close. He's the best player in all of college football. Some buzz and talk about the Heisman and all. He's not going to win the Heisman. I don't even, it's a stretch to but it's a stretch to think that somebody like Jonathan Taylor might win it. But Chase Young, who won it? Charles Woodson or whatever? He had a bunch of touchdowns, didn't he? He was returning interceptions for touchdowns. He was returning kicks for touchdowns. Chase Young is the best player in college football, but you're not going to win the Heisman with a bunch of sacks and tackles for loss. Is that fair? No. But he is the best player in college football. I mean, he is absolutely dominant. He'll get taken. The first team in the draft that doesn't need a quarterback is going to take him. No, so it just depends on how the draft order falls, whether he goes first, second, or third. But he'll be the first non-quarterback taken. And if the team with the first pick doesn't need a quarterback, they're going to take him. He's absolutely unbelievable. He's a goon, like they like to say. Clemson rolled and Trevor had no interceptions. That is a big deal, I think. That's been the question mark about Clemson. They rolled here, and Trevor Lawrence looked really good. 16 of 19, 275 yards and 3 touchdowns. Oklahoma, we talked about that. Penn State, Notre Dame, talked about that. Oregon 37, Washington State 35. Now, this was a surprising game to me. Washington State is not a good team. Mike Leach is a complete weirdo. I know they have a good offense sometimes, but just generally speaking, they're not a very good team. And Oregon had to kick a game-winning field goal at the end of this game to win by 2 points. And that's a little bit surprising because after seeing Oklahoma lose and seeing Notre Dame lose, because this game came on at 2 in the morning or whatever these Pac-12 games come on, Oregon has a shot at the playoff. Now, I wouldn't bet on it. I think it's still going to be a long shot for a one-loss Pac-12 team to get in. But with Oklahoma losing, that helps. With Notre Dame losing, that helps. So they need a couple of more things to happen, but we've seen a lot of weird things happen in the month of November. Some of these teams are going to lose. We just know they are, right? It happens all the time. Utah's the other team that's going to probably finish the regular season with one loss, but I would take Oregon in that game right now. Texas lost again. They're back to being a 4-loss team. They're 5-3 right now. They'll lose another one. We all knew that. The only people that didn't know that were Texas fans. They put way too much stock in that win over Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, period. And we tried to tell them that. They didn't want to listen. Oh, this is just excuses. It's just excuses that Georgia didn't show up for the game. Well, maybe. But the point is you put way too much stock in that game, and we're seeing that now. So congratulations on another 4-loss season, Longhorns. I'm going to talk more about them and Wisconsin. There's a storyline overlapping between Texas and Wisconsin. We'll talk about that with the guest we get on here in just a few minutes. Minnesota continues to stay undefeated for no reason because they're the worst undefeated team, okay? They just are. 8-0 and ranked 17th. That's all you need to know. I think it moved up a little bit, but it doesn't matter. Iowa won again, still with 2 losses. App State undefeated. App State's not going to pass SMU unless SMU loses, though. So SMU looking like the Group of 5 New Year's 6 Bowl team right now. Miami and Florida State won on the same day. That's newsworthy. 2 terrible teams there. Let's see. Texas A&M scored a ton of points in a win over Mississippi State. I'm way less worried about the Texas A&M game as a Georgia fan than I was in the offseason. Texas A&M hasn't been as good as I thought they would be. What else is worth talking about here? Not much. Georgia Southern rolled, but they're not a very good team this year, unfortunately. There's Florida State. They won. What happened to Virginia? People thought they were their second best team in the ACC. Blah blah blah. And now they can't beat Louisville. They've fallen off the map completely. Stanford up 1 week, down the next. Beat Arizona. Nebraska lost again. Already a disappointing season for Nebraska. There's nothing Nebraska can do at this point to make this a successful season. They've lost too many games already. So I don't know. Maybe in the Power 5, maybe year 3 is the year for Scott Frost. Year 2 was the year in the Group of 5. Maybe it takes an extra year in the Power 5. I don't know. Find out next year. They'll be hyped up heading into next season again, I'm sure. North Carolina beat Duke 20-17 with a last-second 3-pointer. Tennessee, talked a lot about them. They rolled. Hats off to them. Kansas won again, 3 wins. Could Kansas get to 4 or 5 wins? I don't know. It's already a successful season for Kansas, though. That's about it. All right. Today in LouTube history. Of course, it's Florida week, so when I search videos from this date throughout the history of my channel, a lot of them are Florida videos. What I'm going to play for you now, this is a video that you know how I do the halftime videos. And, generally speaking, I'm always upset at halftime no matter what the score is. It's just how I am. That's particularly the case when we play Florida, just because I've seen a lot of good Georgia teams go down to Jacksonville and lose. So it's always hard for me to buy in to Georgia over Florida, even if we go out and dominate Florida in the first half, which is what we did in 2017. This is the halftime video from 2017. That was the year Georgia won the SEC, beat Oklahoma in the Rose Bowl, and lost to Bama in the Natty game. We beat Florida this year. What was the final score of this game? 42-7, I think, against Florida. We beat them. We were up 21-0 at halftime. Was that good enough for Uncle Lou? Let's find out why I take my pee break and get this special guest on the phone. Good morning, Uncle Lou here with your official Georgia-Florida 2017 halftime report. Georgia up 21-0 at halftime. Disclaimer / warning or whatever here right off the bat. If you're one of these sunshine pumping Georgia fans who think we can do no wrong ever, click off the video now. First of all, we're up 21-0. That's great. We had our way with Florida in the first quarter. They couldn't stop anything we were doing. They couldn't get a first down on offense. Go up 21-0 pretty much without even trying in the first quarter. Second quarter, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Florida had 2 pretty good drives in the second quarter. One, they got all the way down to the 1-yard line. We held them on 4th down, so good job for the defense there. But still, they ran the ball right down the field. Florida gets the ball back with 3 or 4 minutes to go in the second half. We hold them to a punt. There was 1 minute and 50 seconds left after the 3rd down play. We had 2 timeouts left. They were going to punt. We should have called a timeout there. I don't understand. This happened a couple of times last year, and I wrote it off as, well, first-year head coach. There's going to be some clock management type issues. And I get it. You're up 21-0. We get the ball to start the second half. But, I mean, come on. We haven't scored since the first quarter, so it's 21-0. But, it's not like we're really blowing them out here, especially considering how this second quarter went. So you have a chance to call a timeout and get the ball back with 1 minute and 50 seconds to go in the half and a timeout left to drive down the field and try to get some points before halftime. You elect not to use the timeout. 40 seconds wastes off the clock. Florida punts with 1 minute and 10 seconds to go. We get the ball back with right around a minute to go. We do a meaningless run up the middle for 0 yards. Then we jump off sides. Then we let the clock run out down to 0. And we end the half with 2 timeouts left on the scoreboard. Now, do I think that's going to matter at the end of this game as far as who wins or loses? No. But this is Florida. We should put our foot on their throat and leave it there. Mercy is for the weak. Remember Karate Kid, Miyagi, Danielson, Cobra Kai, do or die. Mercy is for the weak. You should have used your timeouts there, in my opinion. Try to get down and let Blankenship at least kick a long field goal to end the half. You go into the locker room with 2 timeouts in your pocket. It doesn't make any sense, especially considering the second half we had. We didn't do hardly anything second half with the ball. Couldn't really stop Florida in the second half. When they had the ball, they pretty much stopped themselves. That's just how bad they are. But yeah, Florida's terrible. Frank's trash. Y'all's quarterback situation is an absolute joke and has been since 2007. Pathetic. Absolutely no reason or excuse that a school like Florida should go a decade without getting a decent quarterback, but somehow you did. Y'all are just terrible. We'll come out in the second half and dominate this game, I'm sure. Jake Fromm might even have another 4 pass attempts in the second half. Who knows? I think he's 2 for 4 in the first half. Boop-a-doo! 2 for 4. Still got more yards than Frank's, though. Frank's is like 5 for 16 or something like that. He's got 15 or 16 attempts. Fromm's got more yards with 4 attempts, but still 4 pass attempts. Yeah, dominating Florida in the first half, 21-0, with 4 pass attempts, 2 of 4. 1 long run by Sony Michel, a turnover by Florida that gave us some easy points, and a Nick Chubb touchdown run. So, anyway, we'll win this game just like I told you we would all week, but we should have done something there at the end of the second half. You got a man on the ground squirming around, grasping for air. Reach your hands down there and choke the life out of him! So, there you go. I tell you all the time, fan is short for fanatic, and I've been overreacting to Georgia, whether good, bad, or indifferent. And it takes me a day or two to calm down and rationally think about what was going on. But you see how mad I was there at halftime of a game against Florida where we were up 21-0 when I was making that video at halftime and ended up winning 42-7. But anyway, very special guest on the line for you guys today. Most of you know him, I'm sure. Pigskin Pete. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Uncle Lou. How you doing, man?
Man, I'm doing great, and I could not have gotten a better guest. The first ever guest on the Uncle Lou Morning Show. So I really appreciate you making time to do this.
Yeah, no problem. And I can already see the people in the comment section typing. For some reason, not all of them, but a lot of the Lou tubers hate Pigskin Pete. So I'm here to trigger some people this morning.
Well, it shouldn't be too hard to do. Hell, I've made a career out of it. So
yeah,
we'll see what we can do this morning. But I was telling Pete off the air while that video was playing, we're just going to kind of shoot the breeze here, Pete. But there's a story that what was I doing? Oh, I had to go to the grocery store yesterday, and I was listening to I don't remember if it was ESPNU on the radio or one of those other college football sports channels, but they were talking about the end of the Wisconsin-Ohio State game, or actually after the game ended. And I didn't know this, but apparently, and we all know Wisconsin, of course, lost to Illinois and then lost to Ohio State, both on the road. The Illinois band and the Ohio State band, actually, I'm not sure if it was the band or the PA system, but in any case, when the game was over and Wisconsin had lost, the opposing team played Jump Around. And, of course, that's the song that Wisconsin plays at their games. I believe they play it at halftime or maybe the beginning of the game, or maybe they do it all the time. I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, and Wisconsin is mad about it, Pete. They're so mad, in fact, that they filed a formal complaint with the Big Ten. They want a rule put in place that opposing teams cannot play Jump Around, either the band or the PA system, during Wisconsin games. Now, does Wisconsin own the rights to jump around? No. Is this ridiculous or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know how you can actually regulate that.
You can.
I mean, I'd file a complaint against Wisconsin for playing such a crappy song on their game every week. I mean, why would they play Jump Around? What does that even have to do with football in the first place?
That's a good question, but it just seems, and you know, you were talking about triggering people in the comments. The one thing you never do, you never let people know what bothers you. Why?
Right.
Because as soon as they know, what do? They do it nonstop. Right?
Yep.
So,
which is why the same thing with the horns down thing in Texas. Now everybody does it. People didn't even know about it before. You know, if you weren't a Texas fan, you might not have known about it. But now everybody knows about it. So even, you know, a Clemson fan or a Georgia fan or whatever, we're doing it just to piss them off.
Exactly. The bigger of a deal you make out of something, the more likely you are to get trolled about that. So Texas with the horns down thing, they just won't let it go. I have seen Florida does the Gator chomp sometimes if they score a touchdown or something. And there's been instances where opposing teams, while beating Florida, have scored and done the Gator chomp. And I've seen articles written and I've seen fans in comment sections get mad about it. But to my knowledge, Florida has never called the SEC office and demanded that no other team do the Gator chomp. Like, that would be ridiculous. Like, don't do it if you don't want somebody to do it to you. And then definitely don't make that big of a deal of it where people know it bothers you. It's the same way on the internet or on YouTube. Like, if once people find out what bothers me or you, we can expect to see that typed in the comment section nonstop. Like,
yeah, again, I don't even know how you regulate that. And even if they did say, okay, you're not allowed to do that anymore, what would be the penalty for it?
Right.
Would it be a fine? I mean, would it be a suspension of a game? Or, I mean, how do you even control that?
Yeah, you can't. Well, you know how you control it if you're Wisconsin? Don't lose.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, that's the first thing you got to do. Especially don't lose to Illinois.
I mean, come on. So I heard that on the radio yesterday, and I said, I can't believe that. I said, what? And the announcers or the radio host, whoever it was, said the same thing. They were like, well, you know what's going to happen now? Every time they lose, it's going to get played. Like, you know, and they said the same thing we're saying. You just shouldn't make a big deal about it. But anyway, we'll see.
Even if they ban it from the PA system, the fans are still going to sing it and jump around.
Right.
You can't
there's
stop
just
that
nothing
happening.
you can do now. Yeah, they'll probably have T-shirts made and everything else. It's just going to be troll level 1 million every time Wisconsin loses now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about some actual football here. Of course, congratulations to your Clemson Tigers. They rolled again this weekend over Boston College, and Trevor Lawrence played one of his best games of the year.
Right.
I thought so. That will probably quiet some of the people down like me who have been talking about Trevor Lawrence's interceptions this year, and so that was great. So they stay undefeated, and we all know the undefeated teams, and there's only, 5 or 6 left now. You got Clemson, Bama, Ohio State, LSU, Penn State. Is that it? 5?
Yeah, that's it.
So
that's it in the Power 5. I think you got some in the Group of 5 that are undefeated, but
yeah. So, well, yeah, and then you got Minnesota and
SMU,
Baylor.
I think.
Yeah, and Baylor. I think they're in a lower tier. So now, of course, of those undefeated teams, Alabama and LSU are going to play, and Ohio State and Penn State are going to play. So four of those 5 undefeated teams, you have 2 sets that are playing each other. So at least 2 of those 5 are going to lose before the end of the regular season at least once. And in both cases, Alabama and LSU, Penn State and Ohio State, both those teams are in the same division. So I think everyone would agree those are at least all top 10 teams, even if you're one of these people that says, oh, Ohio State's overrated, or Penn State, or Bama, or LSU, whatever. They're at least top 10 teams, even if they lose that huge game to the other undefeated team. They're still a top 10 team. But so with Oklahoma losing, I think that opens some doors. Notre Dame losing, of course, opens some doors. But we have a handful of one-loss teams here, and like we mentioned, there's going to be a couple more added to this list over the next couple of weeks because some undefeated teams play each other. But of these teams, Oregon, Oklahoma, Georgia, Florida, Utah, Wake Forest, those are the only teams right now in the Power 5 sitting on 1 loss. Who's most likely out of those teams to, first of all, finish the regular season without any more losses? And then can any of those teams actually win a conference? Oregon, Oklahoma, Georgia, Florida, Utah, Wake Forest. Your thoughts?
Yeah, the Utah and Oregon debate is interesting because they'd have to play each other in the Pac-12 championship. So if they both went out in the regular season, the winner of that would, finish the year obviously 12-1 Pac-12 champion. Oregon's resume, I think, is a little bit better than Utah's because their only loss is in a neutral site game against Auburn week 1, which they barely lost that game.
Yeah.
And Utah's loss was a pretty bad loss at Southern Cal. Now, interestingly enough, Utah, I don't even think is in first place in the Pac-12 South right now because they're in a tie and a tiebreaker with Southern Cal, and the tiebreaker is Southern Cal's win over them. So it depends on what Southern Cal does for the rest of the season too. If Southern Cal wins out in the Pac-12, then Utah might not even win the South. But I think there is a chance for Oregon to get in there, depending on what happens with these other conferences. Now, look, even with 1 loss, the SEC champion is getting in the playoffs. If there's even a scenario where a 2-loss team ends up winning the SEC, let's say that Georgia loses another game but still manages to win the East, right? But they win the SEC. I think that they would probably get in even as a 2-loss Georgia, as long as they win the SEC. Or maybe if they don't get in, a 1-loss team that didn't win their division or didn't go to Atlanta could possibly get in.
I think that would be the worst case scenario for a team like Oklahoma or Oregon. A 2-loss East team beating an undefeated West team in the SEC title game.
You think that there would be two SEC teams in that scenario?
It would be hard, I think. Let's say, since Alabama's playing at home, let's say they find a way to beat LSU. They make it to Atlanta at 12-0 and somehow lose. It would be a complete mess because, like you said, how do you keep a 2-loss SEC champ team out who just beat probably the first or second ranked team in Alabama? How do you keep them out?
Yeah.
How do you keep 2 1-loss SEC West teams out? And how do you compare that against, let's say, a 12-1 Oklahoma that wins the Big 12 or a 12-1 Oregon that wins the Pac-12? And, of course, this would be assuming that Ohio State and Clemson are in. That would be a complete mess.
Oklahoma, out of all these teams that you mentioned, as a 1-loss team, I think has the hardest road to get to the playoffs at this point. Unfortunately for them, it's not just the fact that they lost; it's the fact that they got dominated the entire game. I don't care what the score says, and also they don't really have. I mean, they got Baylor, right, left on their schedule, which is probably the best person to have left on their schedule. But other than that, I mean, and even if they beat Baylor, they'd rematch against them in the Big 12 championship game because they have that round robin deal going on.
Yeah.
And the fact that you have Oregon and Utah sitting there, the fact that you have all these other, top 5, 6 teams that have, most of them 1 loss, they're all going to look at their resumes and probably, depending on how those teams lose, if they lose a game, compared to what happened with Oklahoma, and they're probably going to be the ones on the outside looking in.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think right now Oklahoma is one of the best 4 teams?
No.
If the playoffs started tomorrow and the playoff committee consisted of Pigskin Pete and that's it, who would your 4 teams be right now?
Ohio State, Alabama, LSU, and Clemson, and not in that order.
Right.
That's the 4 teams.
Yeah. It's hard to argue. It's hard to argue that. Did you watch any of the Ohio State-Wisconsin game?
Yeah, I watched. I streamed it. Yeah.
Are they the team you would want to play the least in a national title game? I know. Listen, Clemson's elite, and for all we know, they go out and beat Ohio State by 14. And I'm not trying to say they wouldn't, but are they the team that? And I'm not even trying to say any team scares you, but are they the team you think like, wow, they're going to be a problem no matter what?
Yeah, I would say so. The reason is because, and I said this and somebody jumped all over me. I said that these are Clemson and Ohio State are the 2 most complete teams. And they're like, Clemson's not a complete team. Well, hell, Clemson right now is the only team in America that's in the top 4 in both offense and defense. They're ranked 2nd nationally in defense and 4th nationally in offense. If you look at these numbers between Ohio State and Clemson, because everyone's been talking about how Clemson's offenses look disappointing this year, right? Well, their numbers are identical to Ohio State's numbers offensively. It's 534 yards a game for Clemson, 508 yards a game for Ohio State. 7.2 yards per play for Clemson, 7.1 yards per play for Ohio State. 41 points per game for Clemson, 44 points per game for Ohio State. So they're basically identical on the offensive side of the ball, and then Ohio State is another team that's a very highly ranked defense. So, yeah, that's the one I would probably be most scared about playing. Now, I honestly wouldn't want to play Alabama for a few reasons because we know who Alabama is, and we're more familiar with them, and they're more familiar with us, and they have revenge factor on their mind. But I think that out of all those teams, that Ohio State is the most complete.
Yeah. You know what the thing about Clemson, and I mean, you can go back through college football history and count on one hand, I think, the number of teams that have repeated as national champions. And if a team, the reason a team tends not to repeat as national champs is usually not talent related. It's hard, I think, to look at Ohio State. Compare Ohio State to Clemson in terms of off seasons. Okay, Ohio State goes 13-1 last year, misses out on the playoffs because of a head-scratching blowout loss to Purdue. They're mad. It seems to me it's easier to stay motivated over the course of the next offseason in that scenario versus a team that wins the national title. And this isn't Clemson. This is, again, teams hardly ever repeat. I think it's hard, like during the offseason, to stay motivated like that. And honestly, when you watch Clemson play, they just look bored. They're so much better, I think, than a lot of the competition. I think they're bored. The best thing that happened to them was that North Carolina game. Right?
I mean, with the exception of the North Carolina game, they've taken out their starters at halftime in every game.
Yeah.
So, but first of all, I agree with you. I even said before the season started that I think the chances are more likely than not that they don't repeat as national champions, no matter how good they are. Because, like you said, it's extremely hard to do that. I think Nick Saban did it one time.
Yeah.
It's just not done. It's not done very often for a reason. I even think it's just hard just to go undefeated in the regular season.
Yeah.
I don't even care if you play in the ACC or the AAC. It's just hard to go undefeated. I mean, almost no teams do it. You might have one or two teams at the end of the year that do it.
I mean, just think about.
So I agree with you.
Just think about and this is to everyone listening too. Just think about whatever it is you do for a living or whatever job you have. Aren't there a lot of times when you go to work, but you're just not feeling it that day? You know what I mean? Like you maybe you didn't get a good night's sleep. Maybe you argued with your wife or your girlfriend the night before, whatever. And I know these are college kids. A lot of them don't have wives or whatever. But the point is, we assume, I think, a lot of times, or just subconsciously, that all these kids do is practice football, eat, sleep, and play football. They have all the other things going on in their life that we do too. You know, they have social problems, whether it's whatever it might be, arguments with their girlfriends, arguments with their parents, maybe in some cases, he's 18, 19, 20, or whatever. And we just sort of assume that they show up every Saturday 100% focused and ready to go to play football. And that's just not, I mean, that's just unrealistic. You know, I mean, there's plenty of mornings I come out here and don't feel like yelling into my camera, and I find a way to do it, but it might not be my best effort. And, that's the case too. And that goes to your point about going undefeated in the regular in the regular season. It is hard to get up week in and week out. And in the case of Clemson or any team that wins a national title, and in Clemson's case goes undefeated and pretty much blows out every team they played, all year, including the playoff game and the national title game. And then Dabo Swinney holds the first spring practice in April, and he's sitting here trying to yell at the player, you got it, you need to do this better, you need to do that better, and they're thinking, but we're 15-0 and we beat every team we played by 30 points. So the motivation factor and the fact that it's just hard to get up week in and week out does make it hard to go undefeated, and that's where the perception of who you are and the perception of the conference you play in really comes into play. Because here we have Oklahoma losing a conference game, and it's a legitimate question now of whether or not they make the playoffs. I don't think anybody would question a one-loss SEC champion. Nobody. It wouldn't matter who they lost to. You look at Ohio State; they got blown out by a terrible team, and they're like, well, they didn't get in because I don't think it would matter. And whether that's fair or not, that's where the argument can happen. But I think we all have to agree, and this year I would say that's true in the Big Ten as well, because the Big Ten is, Penn State, Ohio State, Wisconsin. You got Minnesota. You've got some really good teams in the Big Ten this year. So that's where the perception and the strength of schedule, and you're looking at Oklahoma and you're going, wait a minute, their best win is going to be Baylor? I don't know about that.
Yeah, see, that's why Clemson does what they do, and they schedule real big boys out of conference, because we play two SEC teams pretty much every year out of conference, right?
Yeah.
Well, South Carolina is one of them every year, of course. In this past decade, it's been Auburn 4 times, Georgia twice, Texas A&M twice. So that's where that comes into play. Like, in other words, Oklahoma's out of conference schedule is crap. So they have to rely on these teams being really good in the Big 12 for their, to make their case as a one-loss team. So Clemson has a better out of conference, wins than an Oklahoma would. But like you said, just the rest of the ACC in general is so bad, which isn't Clemson's fault, but it is what it is. That could definitely hurt Clemson if they were to drop a game. I don't think it would necessarily definitely leave them out of the playoff picture. It would depend on what happened with other teams, but it would definitely drastically drop their chances of getting in.
Yeah, and comparing Clemson and Oklahoma in a one-loss scenario in ACC, Big 12, and we say, well, neither one of those conferences are great. Again, I think this is where maybe perceptions of individual teams comes into play, but you got a team like Clemson who has won multiple national titles during the playoff era, has won multiple playoff games during the playoff era, and is coming off a 15-0 season as defending national champs. A one-loss Clemson, I think, definitely gets in. Maybe they stick them with a 4 seed, but I think they definitely get in, as opposed to Oklahoma, who you say, okay, they've won a lot of Big 12 titles, they've made the playoffs a bunch of times, but they've never won a playoff game. So, I don't think this is going to happen, but if it came down to trying to compare Oklahoma versus Clemson this season, and they were both 12-1 with a conference title, I think Clemson gets the nod over Oklahoma. And this is where, they say, well, you're only supposed to look at what happens this year. That's just impossible. Humans cannot just block out of their mind everything they know about college football over the last 3 or 4 years. It's just impossible. Perception is going to come into it, and I think Clemson would get the nod over Oklahoma in that sort of scenario, because Oklahoma has just, they're going to say, well, Oklahoma's never won a playoff game. So I think
plus I think they would probably look at the completeness of the team. In other words, Clemson's top 5 in both offense and defense.
Yeah.
Oklahoma's defense is miles behind what Clemson's is. It's not even close.
Now, what do you think, and this goes back to you don't fall into this category, but you probably get a lot of these same people in your comment section. Oklahoma's defense is clearly better than it was last year. I don't see how anyone doesn't know that. But people have just been arguing with me all year, and now they have the Kansas State game to point to, and that doesn't – look, their defense played terrible. I'm not going to defend their defense against Kansas State. But their defense is – I mean, they were 120-something in every single defensive category on planet Earth last year. They're top 30 in almost every single defensive category. I mean, the defense is clearly better. Is it elite? No. But just because their defense played terrible against Kansas State, all these people are pointing now and going, see, same Oklahoma defense. Yes, the defense let them down in that game, but overall their defense has been better. Is it on Clemson's level? No. No. But clearly it's been better, right?
Oh, yeah, it's definitely been better before that Kansas State game. There's no doubt about that. The problem I saw in that Kansas State game is some of the problems that we've seen in the past with Oklahoma's defense is the tackling. For some reason, I don't know what it is with the Big 12 and tackling. These guys go to wrap up, or they don't wrap up. They just bounce off like a ping pong ball.
Yeah.
You see these guys, it's just especially if you play against a big running back, they can't tackle that guy. It takes 4 guys to tackle him. So. Yeah, they're better than last year. Are they a championship level type of defense? Because I still think, everyone gets all caught up with the offenses nowadays. Look who the top 2 teams are in the AP, right? Ohio State and LSU. But in order to win a national championship, I still believe you have to have a top 10 defense. I mean, maybe not every year. There's been examples in the past where a team that didn't have a top 10 defense won a national championship. But I'd say probably 9 out of the last 10 national champions had a top 10 defense. So they need to get down closer to that 20 to 15, top 20 to 15, as long as their offense continues to be elite to win a national championship, I think.
Yeah, people misunderstand what I say a lot of times because I talk a lot about offense because I'm a Georgia fan and how, our offense just needs to sort of catch up. And people, that's sort of the pushback I get all the time. Well, defense wins championships. I agree with that to an extent, but the game has changed a little over the last 10 years. I mean, Alabama was winning national titles 24-10, 7-8 years ago. You're just not doing that today. You know what I mean? You're not. That's just not happening. So you still have to have a good defense because these teams in the playoffs, offenses are absolutely unbelievable. So you still have to have a good defense, but it's not like you're gonna. And I know you held Alabama to 16, but generally speaking, you're going to need to get into the 30s or 40s to win one of these national title games. Look at your other 2 games with Alabama. They, 42-38, whatever it was. They were real high-scoring games. Last year was sort of the anomaly. And even last year, Alabama had a ton of yards. They just got on y'all's side of the field and couldn't do anything. So but if you just look at the yardage, I mean, they didn't have any trouble getting first downs. It was just they couldn't capitalize on them at all. And that's a credit to Clemson's defense, like you mentioned. But let's end with this. We got Georgia, Florida coming up this week. Whichever team wins that game, and who wins it for the purposes of this argument doesn't matter. Whoever wins that game, let's assume they run